The capitalist European and North American powers have carved out and taken the timber, the bauxite. They have taken out of these countries. These countries are not underdeveloped. They're overexploited. They're overexploited. They're overexploited.
Broka me baketi maya, timba drapa me futeti maya, timba drapa me baketi maya, timba twisa me hipeti maya, timba heavy load, timba.
Good night, folks. Welcome to tonight's program of the Glenn Lall Show, where the publisher of Kaieteur News, Mr. Glenn Lall himself, talks to you about the management of your wealth, whether it's the oil sector or the mining sector, or however the government is handling or mishandling your patrimony. Tonight, Mr. Glenn Lall is joined by myself, Kemol King, the moderator, and my colleague, Kiana Wilberg. So, as we start the discussion, I'm just going to give you over straight to the publisher. Mr. Lall, good night. How are you, and what do you have to tell the people?
I'm fine. I want to begin tonight by telling all Guyana that the conversation in this land has to change. It has to change to a higher level so that we can start focusing rather than the small little things that doesn't do anything for us, and look at the bigger picture as to our wealth. What is happening with it? Where it's going? Whose hands is set to grab it up? And this is a conversation we must have all time. If we let loose or if we fall asleep, we will become like Trinidad and Tobago right now. And I have been following Trinidad and Tobago, and like many other countries, their oil resources, their wealth, and what has happened to them. And of recent, I saw a conference, an oil conference held in Trinidad and Tobago, and the main speaker was the Prime Minister, Mr. Kaieteur. He gave a very powerful and wonderful speech in which I'm going to ask my operator there to just give you a little clip, a little piece of what he said. It is so intriguing and interesting that I think the whole world should listen to it, especially every single Guyanese. You want to give us a little piece?
I try to impress upon the investor class, the investor grouping, our corporate partners, that we are not fighting each other. We're in this together. The only difference is that the investor group has no difficulty in identifying its shareholders. And I, representing the people of Trinidad and Tobago, must also identify and work for my shareholders, who are the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And to do so, there are times when we'll disagree, there are times when we'll be excited about prospects, and there are times when we may have to be disagreeable, hopefully not too frequently. I have given this country the assurance that under my stewardship, Trinidad and Tobago will not go to the IMF. Certainly not for a pittance, while we are allowing our resources to go through our fingers because we were sleeping at the wheel.
Beautifully. It could not have been said better. In a nutshell, that man said so much. Don't sleep at the wheel. You sleep at the wheel, billions will be going through your fingers. The man said, oil companies looks after, they have no problem identifying their shareholders and proud of their shareholders. He said he, as the Prime Minister, has to look out for his people, his shareholders. Let me ask this question, Kiana. What is happening in this country? Our leaders is looking out for us, the shareholders, in our resources. What do you think? And we're here, guys, to take your calls and to take your WhatsApp messages. You can get us on 622-2222. And our telephone number is 226
7453.
There you go. So you have listened there to the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Is our leaders really looking out for our best interests?
Well, Mr. Lall, first of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to be part of tonight's discussion, because it's a necessary one, which I hope we will continue so long as the issues that we're dealing with are not being resolved. And with that said, I'd like to say that I think it's really good that you played that snippet of the presentation that was done by Dr. Keith Rowley, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. He actually made that presentation at a forum called Spotlight on Energy, which is an annual forum that Trinidad and Tobago hosts to place some of the most critical matters in their oil industry at the forefront. And one of the things that jumped out from that snippet that you played there is that shareholders are, for oil companies, they're a big component and they're answerable to them. The Prime Minister is aware of that the oil companies have to do everything in their, as much as they can, to ensure that at the end of the day, the profits are going back to their shareholders. But what are the leaders of Guyana doing for its shareholders, who are its citizens? Are they answerable to us? They are not answerable to us. We've been making several calls for documents to be released for us to know who are the individuals representing us at the negotiating table. Up to this point, we do not know who are the individuals that sat and advised former Minister of Natural Resources Raphael Trotman on the 2016 deal that was signed, which gave away billions and billions of dollars in profits to ExxonMobil and its shareholders. We've asked that question so many times and we don't even know who's been negotiating in our best interest. So from that aspect, I would like to say unequivocally, no, that our leaders are not behaving as though they are answerable to their shareholders. And the other aspect that I'd like to touch on briefly before ceding the floor to my two other colleagues, the Prime Minister spoke about the fact that you can't be sleeping at the wheel while your wealth is slipping through the cracks of your fingers. I don't think that Guyana's situation can be described in such a manner. If it could have been described in such a manner, I would have been hopeful. I would have been very, very hopeful, because it means that you have an opportunity to wake that person up, wake your leaders up. But it seems as though something is way more dangerous at play. We don't have people sleeping at the wheel. We have people who want to drive recklessly. And there's a cost. We don't know what benefit, but no one would ride so or drive so recklessly without there being some sort of benefit to be had.
Beautifully put. Thank you, Kiana. Thank you. Let me just add a little piece. Trinidad and Tobago has an oil conference every year. We have discovered oil 6 years now. We have been the talk of the world. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, you name it, America, England, Europe, all over. And our leaders are behaving as if we are junkies. They're treating us like junkies. Not a single word you're hearing from any one of them. And that is frightening, Guyanese. When you have your leaders and they're not coming out and say a word as to the deals they made with these oil companies, you have to take it serious. You have to wake up. You gotta wake up. You gotta look, just look at what's happening in Suriname. Little Suriname, half the size of Guyana. They snapped oil recently. They have a petroleum law that spells out very clearly as to what the Suriname is to benefit. And compare that to Guyana. We have an outdated law 30 years now. And that doesn't seem on the agenda for our leaders to fix and put in place so that Guyana can benefit. We Guyanese can benefit. Instead, they leave it that way. And who's benefiting? The oil companies are robbing us blind. And not a single word you're hearing from them. Kemol?
Yes, Mr. Lall. I also have a difficulty when I try to answer the question of whether my government is treating me as shareholder, is acting in my best interest, because when that question came up, there are a number of things that popped up in my mind as obstacles to me being able to say yes to that question. So the first thing I think of is the fact that both major parties, while in government, while managing this sector, have made controversial hires. For example, we can talk about the coalition and their hiring of the ExxonMobil affiliate, Dr. Michael Warner, or we can talk about the PPP and their hiring of Miss Alison Redford, who we have found has no experience in reviewing field development plans and has ethical issues plaguing her past while she was running the Canadian province of Alberta, Canada. We have both major parties, while in government, responsible for the giveaways of oil blocks, very, very valuable oil blocks, under suspicious circumstances for next to nothing. We have both major parties giving away these oil blocks with contract terms that are so oppressive that we have shown over the years, this newspaper, those terms are so oppressive that my colleague Kiana, she actually did an extensive review of 130 oil contracts around the world.
Yes.
And has found that our Stabroek Block Agreement, for instance, it pales so much. It pales so much that it's like a contract that is desiccated on its deathbed. Yeah. If I'm to use a figure of speech like that. And also both major parties in their management of this sector have been so secretive in their operations. And I can just point out the secretiveness around the release of the Stabroek Block Agreement, for instance. The secretiveness around the release of the information that Guyana got an $18 million signing bonus from ExxonMobil. And that's just what comes to my mind now in the first few minutes that I'm thinking about this question. There's so much that has happened over the course of the past few years, from 2015 coming up to now, that I cannot find myself answering that question with a yes. I do not believe that our leaders are operating in the best interests of Guyanese shareholders.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautifully said. You know, 2015, the Kaieteur and Kanji oil blocks were signed away 2 days before election. And over the years, we would have carried a number of articles criticizing and asking so many questions about it. I even went and we did some whole page ad, try to explain in a simple layman terms how and why these things happen. I ended up in court, And I must tell you, Guyana, that today I had to appear before the, Justice Singh with ex-President Ramatar. And I was in the box. And as the lawyers began to question me about what I said in the newspapers, and if I felt that it was a corrupt deal, it was a secret deal, and if they collected money, my answer in the box was like, yes, I believe they sell out the block secretly and they took money. I said so in the box. Because in my heart, I can't fathom that 2 oil blocks that worth billions of US dollars that can lift us out of poverty. We shouldn't have no bad roads anywhere in this country. Can fix all our problems overnight. That our leaders would take it secretly and give it out. And you give it out to people who don't have a cent. You give it to people who don't have any experience whatsoever. Man, I could have only concluded. And if you understand much more of what we understand, having been in reporting on the oil industry for so many years, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. Who gives a man his brand new Mercedes Benz to drive that doesn't even know how to ride a bicycle? Who does that? And why would you do that? They have motives behind that. So, and I told the judge very clearly, yes, this is what Glenn Lall believes. And I will accept whatever judgment comes come March, when the decision will be granted. So, Kemol, Kiana, Michaela, Joshua, this oil resources that we have, it is beyond the one's imagination. When you look back at Suriname again, I want to touch on Suriname. What Suriname have disclosed just a few days ago. I have Michaela in here who wrote the stories. She can touch and tell you a little more of what Suriname did, what they have in place. And we are yet to put systems in place to benefit the nation. Michaela, would you like to elaborate a little?
Yes, thank you. The first story I did on the Suriname petroleum law was, well, not the law, but a story we did a few days ago on the they wanted to bid 8 of their blocks. Mm-hmm. It's in the Guyana Suriname basin, mm-hmm. where the Stabroek block is also located. And because of ExxonMobil's de-risking of the block, Suriname capitalized on that. They used that opportunity to say, hey, we haven't explored in these blocks, but we know that you will find oil. So Perfect. What the Suriname government did was they put these 8 blocks up for bidding. Mm-hmm. Now, oil companies from all over the world come and bid, and in that way you get more money from these oil companies. Mm-hmm. In contrast with Guyana, mm-hmm. There's so many cases where we lost billions of US dollars. Like example, the Kanji and the Kaieteur block, with the Stabroek block as well, because we got a small $18 million sign-in bonus that my colleague said was initially hidden.
We got candy monies.
Candy monies mm-hmm. for blocks that were extremely valuable. And it's impressive, and it's nice to know that our neighbors are taking the opportunity to capitalize on a great fortune. The second thing that we did with Suriname was to deal with local content and the strict local content laws that they have in place. They put in place that you cannot bring in a foreigner to work in the oil industry.
Correct.
Unless the local Surinamis don't have that expertise. Mm-hmm. So you cannot bring in a cook from Trinidad and Tobago or a cook from Sweden when you have Surinamese cooks here who can do the same job and probably for even a less price or even better. So those are one of the provisions that they have in their law, which states that you cannot bring in your foreigners unless we don't have the expertise. And even if we don't have the expertise, it is now it's on the onus of you to train us to become equipped.
Beautiful.
Secondly, even if you say, okay, so I've been employing a few Surinamis, like 5,000 Surinamis a year, the company at the end of the year has to submit a report to the government stating the nationalities of all of their employees. So there are no loopholes for you to jump through. You can't break the law. And thirdly, what was the other story? Fourthly.
You went through a list.
The other story was
about
with
auditing.
Yeah, the auditing.
Audit, yeah.
So the Surinamese government has access to all of the records of the oil companies, who they use, how much they pay for it, the finances, everything under the sun. The country can go anytime they want to access these records. With Guyana, we don't have those
privileges.
Those privileges. In the case with the Stabroek Block Agreement, we have to give the contractor a 7 days notice before we decide to visit their offshore operations. And we can only do an audit once a year. And we're still on auditing the 460 million pre-contract costs, which is not even finished because the GRA said that they completed one phase of it, but they had to send back that report to ExxonMobil so that they can answer queries that the Revenue Authority may have. So we got a very, 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 very short end of a stick. I look at Suriname and I think they are very fortunate because the leaders put the people first.
Beautifully said.
And I wish that our leaders would do the same.
Thank you, Michaela. You said Suriname didn't give away their privileges. Guyana didn't give away ours. Guyana sell our privileges because it's there in the contract. Why would you allow an oil company to drop your contract that does not give you the right to monitor, to check, to audit their spendings? Why? A fool wouldn't do something like that, or an idiot. And this is what Guyana does. This is why Suriname is much ahead of us in every aspect of the oil contract deals. Yeah?
If I can add to that, it's very interesting the stories that Michaela spoke about just now. And everyone that she touched on, it just makes you realize how oppressive the ExxonMobil deal is. And the reason why I say oppressive is because Suriname, just to give you some perspective on this, Suriname is not enjoying anything that Guyana can't.
I hear you.
When you have resources, it's your right, your God-given right to get the best the best deal that you can get, to get the maximum benefits out of it. That is your right, to use every tool as possible, every mechanism that is available to you. So what we are essentially doing is saying, okay, I'm entitled to this, but I don't want it.
Wow.
Which sane person would be entitled to billions of dollars and say, no, it's okay, you can take it. Give your shareholders and your family and your friends. It's okay, I will stay without and leave my people to be further oppressed for decades to come. That's essentially what we're saying.
Kiana, they would want the nation to believe that. And you have to be a moron to believe
Yes.
that they love the oil company
Yeah.
more than the nation itself. You have to read between the lines, Guyanese. You need to read between the lines. Not even an idiot would do that. Not even a junkie you can rob. Give a junkie $1,000 to divide among three. They know exactly what they have to get. But our leaders think that we are a set of idiots to say, well, oil company, take this and take that and go. And nothing is left for us. We are told by our leaders they're putting together $25,000 for household. I did a video today in which I said we should not be getting $25,000 yearly as a household. If we get good deals, we can get $25,000 an hour, and not for household, for each citizen of this land. But there we go. Unless you stand up, unless you speak out, Guyana, unless you call our leaders and say, listen, we are not going to take this. You have to stand up for you to get what you deserve, Guyana.
Someone on the Facebook Live is asking, who sold away the privileges? Who sold the privileges away? Her name is Pam. She wants to know, Mr. Lall.
Pam, all the leaders of this land sold out. And I want to remind you, if you didn't never listen or heard it, let me remind you what oil companies do. The first thing, they enter your country and they line the pockets of the politicians. Then they create confusion, chaos, and instability. And while we fight among ourselves, they're fetching our wealth away. If you understand, if I'm pretty much certain you understand what I just said there, just read through the lines and you will understand why we are where we are today with our oil blocks and the deals.
Okay, so if I can add to what
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Lall has said to Pam and her question. Indeed, the leaders, both past and present, for both regimes, have sold us out. During the PPP's time, it was with the Kaieteur and Kanji block, and with the AP and New AFC, it was with the Stabroek and then the Orinduik. And I wanted to touch a little on Orinduik because I think sometimes the significance of what happened with the Orinduik block often gets lost. The Orinduik block was given out by former Minister of Natural Resources, Raphael Trotman. And that contract that is just a few miles away from the Stabroek block was given out after the Liza Phase 1 and 2 discoveries were made. Now, how can you still pursue a one-on-one negotiating process for an oil block that is just mere miles away from one that has significant oil resources? One would think that any block in that area or in that basin, the value of it has just gone up. So why would you avoid competitive bidding and still go through a one-on-one backroom negotiating process? Then in that contract, Minister Trotman, I don't know if, again, it would really be interesting to know who were the individuals advising the former minister. Because in that contract, Guyana has a 1% royalty, and that 1% royalty is recoverable.
My God.
So how on earth do you give away your resource and say, well, listen, I want you to pay me, but whatever you pay me, you could still recover it. So what am I benefiting?
In short, what Kiana has said there is that we are paying, we give away the oil block, and we are paying them to take the oil for free.
Correct.
And she touched on Orinduik, but there are many others that we didn't touch on. And this story is so smelly that I'm sitting here and I'm smelling those oil blocks. You have the Berbice block, you have the CGX that CGX got, you have the Demerara block, you have the Quarantine block. All three of those blocks were given away at the same 1% royalty. I don't recall if that is recoverable, but I remember when the PPP signed 1% with Exxon and Trackman go and get 2%, there was a big buse down and cost down. He could have get more, he could have get more, he could have get more. But the PPP is not telling you that they are the ones who sign away most of these oil blocks on a 1% royalty. And we don't want to touch on profit at all. I don't want to hear that word profit. Anybody that talks about profit sharing is a moron and a fool. And I am a businessman. And I could tell you, if somebody come tell me, Glenn, I'm going to share profit with you, I will tell them some harsh and very stinking words. Don't talk the word at all, profit. Stick with royalty. And there you got it. What did we have? I'm in a good mood. I had a Malta just now, and it's like it has tempered my emotion. So that's why I'm not saying much. Yes, Kemol, you want to say something?
I wanted to add that usually when you bring up the question of whether Guyana could have made money, especially when we talk about the giveaway of the Kanji and Kaieteur blocks, one of the things they like to say is we didn't know that we had oil there. So I want to explain something that happens in the process before the oil companies decide, I'm going to drill this well. So what they do, they conduct a seismic campaign. And after they conduct that seismic campaign, they contract a company to study the data in that campaign. And the company then compiles a report after they've made sense of the data. And then they provide this report to the oil company, and the oil company looks at it and they say, okay, we have identified 10 or 15 prospects inside this well. And for each prospect is a well that we could drill. And at each well, we estimate that we will find 250 million barrels of oil. And we estimate that at this other well, we'll find 500 million barrels of oil. And the company that has to do the analysis also tells them, you have a 35% chance of getting a successful discovery here, or a 98% chance of getting a discovery here. And that is information that would have been supplied to the government way before ExxonMobil decided, I'm going to drill this well or that well.
Correct.
Because one of the things that's in this contract is that the government owns all of the data. Every single study that the oil companies do in every single one of our blocks, they have to supply the data to the government, and they have to supply the reports on the interpretations of the data to the government. So for Donald Ramatar or Robert Prasad to say, we did not know there was oil in the basin, we knew exactly what ExxonMobil expected to find before they went to drill. So it is a little dishonest or disingenuous for a politician to say we did not know that there was oil there. We knew ExxonMobil expected to find oil there. We knew they expected to find billions of barrels there. So people should not fall for that.
Kemol, I would even go as far as to say that it's disrespectful. Because, and I'll just take you to the drilling that was supposed to take place, and just to add to what you're saying, the drilling that took place on the Kaieteur block. The first well, it's called Tanager 1 well. Before this well was drilled, everyone knew that the first prospect to be drilled was going to be Tanager because of a report that highlighted which areas would be the best to drill on the Kaieteur block and which is likely to give you the highest rate of success. And that was the Tanager well, and it was estimated to have over 250 million barrels of oil. Now, when that happened, when that drilling started and it was concluded, it was very clear from all of the joint venture partners that the discovery was not enough to make a standalone development. So you know what they did? They came forward and they said, the discovery at the Kaieteur block, the first well for the Kaieteur block, is non-commercial. When oil was found in the Liza Phase 1 area, no one said non-commercial. No one said non-commercial. What you heard was that Guyana found significant oil deposits. And it comes back to what Kemol was saying. The government would have known that this is what ExxonMobil was targeting. All it needed was confirmation. And getting to that point in the drilling of the block, you would know, based on the seismic data that you have, well, yes, we are about to make a landmark discovery. So with ExxonMobil making that discovery at the Liza one, it was just a confirmation of what the government already knew. Yeah. So it comes back to what Kemol was saying, that, you know, this is for anyone to believe that Ramatar, the former President Donald Ramatar, or the former Natural Resources Minister, Mr. Robert Prasad, was acting in Guyana's interest, they would be foolish. They would be foolish to be thinking so.
Mm-hmm. Let me just add a little piece what you talked about, Kemol, on Guyana. When Trotman signed the block away, he was warned. They had asked for information, if you remember, Guyana,
yes,
from the oil exports. And they warned him, they asked him to wait. Trotman had to wait a few days more. From the same people, they asked for help in determining what amount or if oil was discovered there. Mm-hmm. Guyana, you know, that Trotman went ahead and signed that deal without waiting for the export advice they seek. Yes. Yes. It's like you ask the export to come help me here so that I can make a deal that will benefit Guyana. But you did not wait on the man's response. You went ahead and signed off the deal. And as to Guyana just said in the Kaieteur block where they drilled the first well, and they come out and say, well, it's a non-commercial well. Define a little, but it's non-commercial. Mm-hmm. As a businessman, I'm going to tell you, I'm like reading through these people. There are many more such games that they will play with us. I believe what we are doing here is waking up this nation, waking up you with the type of information that you need to know They are looking for sympathy, and they would be putting themselves in a way that you will feel sorry for them. Well, we dig another hole and we not get nothing. We will dig another one and we not get nothing. They know exactly what they have, and they know exactly where to drill. So they will be playing games with you and with us.
You know,
I just want to add that piece to it.
I think we can bounce off what we're talking about all night. What Kiana mentioned with the discovery that they just made in the Kaieteur block.
Mm-hmm.
There are discoveries that they made in the Stabroek block that were also very small.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, they made the Pakora discovery
Yeah.
in the Stabroek block, which was a very small discovery. And I pulled up the press release here.
Mm-hmm.
And so with Pakora, they discovered about 20 meters of net oil pay. And with Kaieteur, they discovered 16. So this is very close to each other.
Mm-hmm.
With Pakora, they put out a long press release saying we found 20 meters of high-quality oil-bearing sandstone reservoir. There was no press release for the Kaieteur find. And in the Pakora press release, they said, we found this, and we've decided that we want to integrate it into the Payara project.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were planning the Payara project, and they found that, okay, this discovery is so close to this that we can integrate them and we can make it into one project. There was no public release for the Kaieteur 1 well. So it makes you want to ask the question, why do you do that for this? And why not do the same thing for this discovery in the Kaieteur block? What does it mean?
You know, Kemol, sorry, Mr. Lall, if you'd like to go
No,
ahead.
you go ahead.
You spoke about integration there, and I think that it's a very important point. Hess Corporation in particular, it's very vocal about its Guyana asset, its stake in the Stabroek block, and its boast to it's been confidently stating at almost every meeting or every forum or opportunity that they have to speak that Guyana's discovered resources can support 10 oil vessels, otherwise known as floating production, storage, and offloading vessel. Now, I remember having an interview or a discussion with a former Houston instructor. His name is Tom Mitro. And he said, you know, Kiana, I really think that the government needs to slow down, understand what resources are close to each other, and figure out a way of joining many of those instead of having separate projects for each, because that only makes it further cumbersome and it only creates more opportunity for inflated costs. So if you have 10 projects and you can inflate the costs, the development costs for all 10, can you imagine how much checking you will have to do to find out every detail to ensure each cost is comparative with what the international prices are? It's going to be so burdensome for Guyana. We don't have the human resources for it. So I really wanted to bring that point up about the integration. ExxonMobil is able to integrate wells or pull the wells together that they believe, okay, you know what, this is enough resource to add to this other project or to consolidate. Why isn't Guyana doing the same in terms of trying to be economical with the cost that we will eventually have to pay back?
Guyana, several oil-producing countries are still reeling from debt they received from oil companies. As a matter of fact, some countries, the oil is finished and they still owe the oil companies billions.
Yes.
Senegal is one of them. What they're doing there is creating, because of the contract we have, it's not a contract. This agreement, it's not even an agreement. It's an open thing this government give these oil companies. So what they do, they drill here and they hand you a bill. They drill there and they hand you a bill. And they drill here and they hand you a bill. We didn't even begin to check a 1 billion pre-contract cost. And we already have $20 billion on Lisa 1, Lisa 2, Lisa 3, which is Payara. And all the rest that they're going. It's just to create expenses in the billions that will be throwing to you. In short, Tom Mitro is telling Guyana, slow down, take your time, control the bills that is coming your way. You can't handle it. You can't count, you can't check bills fast enough that they're throwing at you. You don't even know what they're doing. But instead, our leaders, I don't think some of them understand what is playing out. And if they do, they're just turning a blind eye. Having the oil company them just throwing bills at us in the billions. I don't know, if you do the maths, I don't know when Guyana will ever get, in which year Guyana will ever get 1 billion in the oil deals we sign. 1 billion, much less 30-40 billion dollars. So I really don't know what is happening in this land with our oil deals.
Just to add to what Mr. Lall said there about Mr. Mitro bringing out the point of Guyana's slowing down to check the costs. And I just wanted to mention this for our listeners. So Guyana has oil contracts that are called production sharing agreements. Now, the grandfather of this type of agreement is considered to be Indonesia. They were the first to pilot the use of such contracts. Now, it's surprising that Indonesia, which has piloted the use of production sharing agreements, has moved away from production sharing agreements. Why? Because the burden to check every single cost and the different mechanisms or schemes employed by the oil companies to inflate costs and hide documents here or there, it was so burdensome. So, and just to give you an idea, Indonesia had a staff of over 700 individuals. Over 700 auditing cost after cost after cost, and they still couldn't get it right. And they were still robbed. Mm-hmm. So if the grandfather of this type of agreement has found so many issues, it had 700 individuals, 700 citizens auditing these costs, what do you think is going to happen with Guyana?
Yes, but thank you for that. I want to put what you said there in a nutshell. Let me try to put that in a nutshell so that people who are listening, the ordinary folks, can understand what you just said there. The agreement, the production sharing agreement that we have with the oil company is talking about two things. They're talking about royalty and profit sharing. As Kiana said, the grandfather for that model disappeared from it. Said, no, don't give me that. What most countries accept, and even today they accept it, is royalty only. We don't want to hear about profit sharing. Profit sharing is like you and somebody have a business. Now, you have to check every cent the man spends to make sure he doesn't rob you. And the bills is so much, you would run mad just to check the bills. So what countries do? They say, no, don't give me profit. Give me royalty. Royalty is where you collect if you agree at a 10% or a 5%, you take that right away and go your way. What the man spend, and you have no control. Royalty comes clear of any expense. You pay nothing on royalty. let's say you have a 2% royalty on mangoes. You have a mango tree and the man say, listen, you want to come do business with mangoes here. And you say, okay, listen, I don't want no profit. I want royalty on the mango. You give me 5 mango on every 100. And you go along. Spend your money, pick your 95 and you take your 95. But I want 5 mangoes free of any cost. That is what countries do. Just give me 5, let me go along my way. And you try with your expense and you try with your 95. Some countries take 10 mangoes out of the 100. Some countries take 15 mangoes out of 100. It depends on the deal you sign with the mango man. It depends the deal you sign with the oil company. So we sign 1 and 2%. I don't think any country in the world has that. Suriname, simple Suriname. Suriname signs 6.25%, which means 6.25 mango of every 100 belong to Suriname with no cost attached. That is what a production sharing agreement means in a nutshell. Royalty and profit sharing.
All right, folks, we're going to take one break for just a minute. And when we come back, we're going to allow everyone to give their final thoughts, and then we will take some of your questions. So 1 minute, operator.
And as to fear, what do I say about fear? The things that I would have went through in my life, I think that word has disappeared from my physical, emotional, spiritual self. I have no fear about anything. My belief kills fear, and I wish mankind can see life the way I see life. I believe that everything that happens to us is being directed and commanded by the Maker. And if whatever happens tomorrow, I know that the Maker wants it to happen. So fear is nowhere with me.
What about the rest of the panel? You've all been writing some very cutthroat stories about the oil and gas sector. How do you feel?
Well, Kemol, what I tell you is I believe that the most powerful force in this life and any other life is that of God. And that's the only being that I fear. And so if anything happens, then that is God's will. And I think that it would be a privilege to know that I would have exposed or done my part or played my role in exposing what needs to be exposed. I have no fear of no man, and I never will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mikhail, what about you?
That's my girl.
This is similar to what Kiana said. The stories that you're writing and the changes and the advocacy that you go behind, you're fighting for the people, because apparently the leaders will not do it for the people. They are responsible for doing it. And with that type of work, how passionate you are with your work for fighting for something great, I think fear is out of the question. Like, the advocacy it's more than enough. So fear of itself, it's a thought, but it never hampers how I work.
Well said.
And
Kemol,
that's not to say that we're going to be reckless.
Yeah.
Kemol,
Yes.
if you understand life the way I do, you see, I believe that the Maker, the Creator, sent us here for a specific reason, a purpose. I believe that He directs every thought, every movement, every action of my life. So when you have that type of belief, you can't walk this earth with fear. It's impossible to walk this earth with fear. It means, in simple nutshell, that you're doing His will. I'm carrying out His work. So then you can't have no fear for man. So I thank the caller for that question.
Mm-hmm.
Next, do we have any more questions we wanna?
Someone wants to know, why weren't the awarding of the contracts debated in Parliament, perhaps put to a vote? I think Mr. Lall and Kiana would be the most qualified persons to address that question.
Ms. Lall, you want to? Okay. So that's a very beautiful question. And it's not something that Kaieteur News has not put in the open for discussion. We've had several stories. I remember one that I had done was with former Auditor General and Chartered Accountant, Mr. Anand Gulsaran, who said that these contracts should be placed in Parliament for debate. And I know that there are many African countries which have pursued such an avenue, and when the contracts are there for public discourse, it brings about a different awareness from our politicians, and we really get to force them to action, not just to see what are the loopholes in the contract, but to ensure that they're plugged before they're given any blessings, so to speak. And unfortunately, the only sort of approach we've seen in the past in particular, are aspects of the contract which went to Parliament, and it was to basically say, we're waiving our rights for you to pay taxes to us, and you can go ahead and just get tax concessions galore for not just yourself, but your affiliates, subcontractors. So that's the only kind of discourse that we've ever seen on on some of these oil agreements, and it would be in our best interest to continue to push for a debate of oil agreements, because I think that quite frankly, I think many of our politicians are sailing somewhere on a cruise ship, far, far away.
If I could add to that, last Tuesday, I had a guest, Dr. Taran Kemraj, on Petroleum 101.
Mm-hmm.
He is a professor of economics at the University of South Florida. And one of the things he talked about when I asked him about his views on the oil contract, he said that this contract is so bad because our leaders decided that they did not want to approach the other side to discuss how we could make it better. That a group of people sat down with this and they decided, I know best and I'm going to do it this way. And I don't think that there's anything that the other side can offer me. Mm-hmm. And so when he addressed the contract, he called it a disunity contract. He said the contract is reflective of a reluctance to go over to the other side and say, let us do this together. That the contract is reflective of the disunity in our parliament, in our government, and in our society. And unless we address those issues of disunity, that we don't want to cross the aisle and work on these things together, then we cannot manage our oil sector in the way it's supposed to be managed.
All right, let me add my bit to that, Kemol and Michaela. I don't know what to say about my parliament or our parliament. Guyana says they're sailing somewhere past Exxon, the Starbuck block. I don't think we have a parliament, because I recall the first $460 million US we get as pre-contract costs. We are checking that. We are auditing that now. But guess what, Guyana? Parliament, the same parliament that Kemol talked about, already approved and accepted that. So what are you checking? It's like you agreed to pay the people them $460 million, and now you go in and audit that. What sense does that make? You have the oil blocks, the same Kanji and Kaieteur oil blocks that the PPP gave away, and those oil blocks were able to be transferred to Canada and out of the country, and that also had to get the blessings from Parliament. They all agreed and allow you give the people the blocks. The people collected here in a Guyana company, collected there. The next few morning, they asked for it to be transferred, for it to be sold overseas. They have collected millions of American dollars, and what did Guyana get? Nothing. Not even a 2-cent taxes you got. And who approved them? Parliament approved them. So is of what use do we have a parliament, Kemol?
You're right. I remember once when I was covering Parliament, the government side, back when it was APNU-AFC, they were discussing affirming the section of the Starbuck Block Agreement that gave the oil companies a tax waiver. And I remember in that Parliament, the PPP side, the opposition side at the time, they didn't even come to Parliament. So it's just a further reflection of the disunity that Dr. Kemol was talking about.
And just to add to that, when I was covering the budget, the debates that they had in the parliament, it's like they're children. People on the other side telling this other person, "Oh, when last you washed your car?" Like it's so childish that these are the leaders of the people that you put in charge, and they're acting like children. It's really disheartening to see. And we have a question here. I don't have the person's name, but they're asking, will Guyana ever develop with the poor deal that we have?
Wow. Unless we get out there and demand from our leaders to relook and rescind, and we can, like Kiana said, we can only do that by having a petroleum law. I don't know. I think the agreement signed, if I am correct, Kiana will tell me. The agreement we signed with them supersedes any law that comes now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow.
Raymond Gassi says.
Well, if Guyana is to change the laws now, and it doesn't affect the agreement that we made with them, then can't eat with dinner. You hear that, Guyana? If Guyana is to put together a law, a petroleum law now, and it cannot touch ExxonMobil's contract, then can't eat your dinner.
All right, folks. We are down to the final about 3 minutes of our show tonight. So I am just going to allow the panel, especially the publisher, to give any final comments he wants to make.
I wanted to touch on so many things, Kemol. I wanted to say so much, but sometimes like you don't know where to begin. When you start talking about this oil contracts and our oil blocks and the deals that were made, and these people are so silent, you know. The silence is what is killing us. Not a single word. You know, today I had cause to put on the page 7 that Robert Passad should be dismissed forthwith from the position he is in right now. Donald Ramatar's pension should put on a hold, both of them, until they can come clean to this nation as to the Kaieteur and Kanji block giveaway. When I think about it, I want to cry for you, Guyana. Not for myself. I want to cry for you because it's nothing there for you. It's like these people just say, go, take it. And the more damning and disrespectful part of it all, Guyana, is that Robert Passad is sitting in a chair presently now that every single foreign deals that come to this land has to pass through his hands. And this is the same man telling Guyana he didn't sign no contract when he was the minister of the oil blocks. He said he didn't sign. And he don't know the owners. He only met the lawyers who signed the contract. And that he can't remember them. Well, if you can't remember giving away billions of US dollars that belong to us, to you, Guyana, you can trust a human being like him sitting as a foreign secretary to this country? Just think about what I said there. Yes.
All right, now, do either of you have any comments to make before we close?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll just make this brief comment. I think what we started on this evening on looking at Trinidad and Tobago and Suriname, I think that they both offer really insightful lessons as to how Guyana can ensure that it improves governance, transparency, and accountability in the oil sector. We're new, and the lessons are just across our borders. We don't have to look far. We don't even right at Venezuela, we can see there's so many lessons that we can learn on what not to do. And I hope that our leaders will, sooner rather than later, pay attention to the mistakes made by others, pay attention to some of the good things that's been done in the industry, and start to incorporate that into Guyana's governance framework.
Just to add to what my colleague said, Suriname is set to reap about $50 million within the next 20 years from the 20% stake that it has in one of their oil blocks. I had the honor.
Did you say 15 million?
50
Oh,
million. $50 million. I had the pleasure and the honor of meeting the newly installed president of Suriname, Mr. Chandrika Prasad Santoki. And I asked him, what advice do you have for the new PPP government? And he said that even with Suriname that is set to collect all this money in the coming years, it will be transparency and robust policies that will ensure a good life for all of the citizens. And like my colleague said, these are our neighbors that we can take pages out of their books, learn a lesson, and put it into it, implement it. And I just wish that our leaders would put all their differences aside and put the people first, the country first, so that we can all prosper.
Did you mean $50 billion?
It says 50.
I wish Kemol.
$50 billion. I'm so sorry. $50
I wish
billion.
Kemol
Yeah.
that I can use those fancy, mild, sweet languages coming from my colleagues here, but I just can't. Maybe I'm seeing life different from them. I would love to hug them and kiss them, but I can't. Do we have any more messages?
I think
No, that's
it
all.
for
So we're going to
today.
close now. Thank you very much,
Join us.
listeners on the radio and viewers on the Facebook page. Please join us on Wednesday. We're going to be back here with Mr. Lall and his team to have another fruitful conversation about the management of your wealth. So enjoy the rest of your night. I am Kemol King.
I'm Michaela Prince.
I'm Kiana Wilberg.
I am Glenn Lall. Please, if you would have missed the entire program, it will be re-aired tomorrow at 11 a.m. Thank you and have a good night.